I used to think our marriage was the safest place on earth. Not perfect, never perfect, but safe in the way a familiar road is safe. You know where the bumps are. You know which turns to take. You know the sound your partner makes when he's about to laugh, the way he sighs when he drops his keys on the counter, the little rituals that say, without words, we're still here. Our evenings had a rhythm I could follow with my eyes closed. He'd come home, toss his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, and call out my name like he was checking that his life was still intact. I'd answer from the kitchen, and he'd appear behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, pressing his cheek to my shoulder as if the day couldn't touch him once he had me. We ate simple dinners. We watched whatever show we were binging. We argued about harmless things, whether the trash was full enough, whether the thermostat was too low, then made up with soft touches and sleepy laughter. At night, he'd reach for me in the dark, and I'd let myself believe that being chosen over and over was the same as being protected. That's what trust does. It turns ordinary into proof. If I'm honest, I loved the predictability. I grew up in a house where moods could change without warning, where love felt like something you earned by being quiet and easy. When I met my husband, he felt like the opposite of that chaos: steady, warm, dependable. He learned my coffee order. He remembered my birthday without reminders. He held my hand in crowded places like he couldn't stand to lose me. So when little things started to feel off, my first instinct wasn't suspicion. It was self-correction. He began taking his phone into the bathroom, even for quick trips. He used to leave it charging on the counter like it was just another object. Now it stayed on him like a second pulse. When a notification lit up, he'd tilt the screen away on reflex. If I asked who was texting, he'd answer too fast, work, and then laugh like my curiosity was cute. I told myself it was stress, a new project, a demanding boss. Men go through phases, I thought. Marriage goes through seasons. But the seasons didn't explain the way his eyes sometimes slid past mine, as if he was looking at a version of me that existed only in his head. They didn't explain the sudden bursts of affection that felt timed, like he was paying a bill before it was due. They didn't explain how he'd go quiet when I entered a room, then brighten a second later, performing normal. The strangest change was his pillow. It sounds ridiculous, I know. A pillow isn't a person, it can't lie. But lately, he treated that pillow like it mattered more than comfort. He'd fluff it just so, tug the pillowcase tight, and position it with care, as if the shape of his sleep depended on it. If I shifted too close at night, he'd draw it nearer to his chest. If I reached across the bed for the remote, he'd move his arm, blocking without waking fully. One night I joked, "Are you hiding snacks in there?" And he smiled without humor. "What?" he said. "Your pillow," I teased, light on purpose. "You're guarding it like it's your firstborn." He kissed my forehead and said, "You're weird," in a tone that ended the conversation. I told myself I was the weird one. Because the alternative, that something was being protected from me, felt too ugly to hold. On the night everything changed, the house was quiet in that tender way it gets when the world finally stops demanding attention. Rain tapped at the window with soft persistence. The kitchen was dim except for the stove light, and the whole place smelled faintly of dish soap and the lavender candle I lit when I wanted us to feel like a home. He had been in a good mood that evening. Too good. He offered to do the dishes, kissed me twice for no reason, and kept checking his phone like he was waiting for permission to relax. When I asked if something happened at work, he said, "Nothing, just happy." Happy like a switch. We brushed our teeth side by side. He avoided my eyes in the mirror, then caught them and smiled big enough to cover the distance. In bed, he sighed dramatically and said, "I'm exhausted," like the day had wrung him out. He turned off his lamp and rolled toward the wall. I clicked off mine a moment later and listened to the darkness settle. His breathing slowed quickly. Mine didn't. I lay there staring at the faint stripe of streetlight across the ceiling, thinking about all the small mismatches I'd collected without nomming them. Trust asked me to ignore them. My body asked me not to. Then he shifted, half asleep, and pulled his pillow closer, tucking it under his chin like it held something he couldn't risk losing. I swallowed and reached back in the dark, searching for the remote so I could turn the volume down on the quiet buzz of my own thoughts. My fingers brushed the edge of his pillow. And then I felt something beneath it that didn't belong there. I didn't find it while snooping. That's the story people like because it makes betrayal feel avoidable, like if you never look, you never get hurt. I found it by touch, the way you find a splinter. By accident, because something that didn't belong in my life was already lodged in it. It was close to midnight, the hour when the house feels like it's exhaling. The dishes were done, the lights were dim, and the ceiling fan hummed steady above us. My husband was already in bed, one arm tossed over his eyes, half asleep and pretending he was. "Coming," he mumbled. "In a minute," I said, rinsing my toothbrush and catching our reflection in the bathroom mirror. Two people in the same doorway, living the same life. That was the version of us I trusted. Stable, predictable, safe. When I slid under the blanket, he shifted over without opening his eyes. His body was warm, the mattress dipped, and for a second I let myself sink into the comfort of it. Our bed had always been our truce. No matter what happened outside this room, we ended up here with the quiet promise that we were still us. He rolled toward me, kissed my shoulder, and sighed like the day had finally stopped asking things of him. "You okay?" I asked, mostly out of habit. "Yeah," he said fast, and then he tugged his pillow a little closer, a small protective movement that shouldn't have mattered. Except it had been happening lately. Not loud changes, not the kind you can accuse, just tiny mismatches, taking his phone into the bathroom, turning it face down on the counter, laughing a beat too late. He'd changed his passcode after years of using the same one, and when I teased him, he smiled like a stranger and said, "You never know." You never know. It sounded like a joke. It also sounded like a warning. I turned off my lamp. Darkness settled in, with streetlight leaking through the curtains. He fell asleep quickly, breathing slow and even. I listened to it, trying to let the rhythm lull me back into that safe story. Then my foot brushed something cold. At first, I thought it was the remote. I reached behind me without looking, fingers searching in the dark. My hand met fabric, his pillowcase, then the firm curve of his pillow. And underneath it, something hard, flat, rectangular. Annoyance flickered. Who puts anything under a pillow? It's like sleeping on a secret. I lifted the corner carefully, trying not to wake him. The object slid out just enough for my fingers to close around it. A phone. Not his everyday phone, the one that buzzed on the kitchen counter and played videos too loud when he couldn't find his earbuds. This one felt newer. Smaller. Bare, no case, no scratches, like it didn't live in the open. The screen lit the second I touched it, a soft flare of blue that made the room look suddenly sharper. And it was warm. Warm from use. My stomach dropped so fast I tasted bile. I froze, phone in my palm, and watched my husband for any sign he'd noticed. He didn't move. His breath stayed steady. The air between us thickened with a silence that wasn't empty. It was waiting. I should have put it back. I should have told myself there was a reasonable explanation. A work phone. A spare. Something boring that would let me laugh at myself in the morning. But my body didn't believe in reasonable anymore. My hand started to shake. My mouth went dry. My skin prickled with that sudden animal awareness you get when you realize you might not be safe, even in the place you thought was safest. It was ridiculous, I told myself. This was my husband. This was our bed. Except the phone in my hand made the bed feel contaminated, like something invisible had been spilled into the sheets. I sat up a little and angled the glow away from his face. The lock screen stared back. No family photo, no familiar wallpaper, no cute caption. Just a dark background and notifications lined up like teeth. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe a calendar alert. Maybe an email from a coworker, something harmless, something I could unsee. Instead, the top notification read, "Can't stop thinking about tonight." My fingers went numb. Below it, "Did you delete everything? He can't find out." Hey. Not you. Not your wife. Hey. My heart began to pound so hard I was sure it would wake him. The ceiling fan kept turning, indifferent, chopping air into a hush, like the house had no idea my life was splitting open. I looked at my husband again. His face was turned toward the wall, lips slightly parted, peaceful. The contrast made my throat burn. How could someone look so innocent while hiding something this dirty under his pillow? Nausea rolled through me in a slow wave. I pressed my free hand to my stomach, trying to keep still, trying not to make a sound. I felt suddenly too bright inside my own skin, like my nerves were exposed. My mind tried to bargain. Maybe tonight meant a poker game. Maybe delete everything meant a surprise party. Maybe he meant a boss. But the simplest truth stood there, solid and cruel. He had a second phone. Hidden under his pillow, like it was precious, like it was dangerous, like he couldn't risk leaving it anywhere else. My thumb hovered over the screen, and I realized I was afraid of what one swipe might do to the rest of my life. Behind me, my husband shifted. My pulse spiked. I held my breath until he settled again, his arm tightening around the pillow I'd just lifted. He hugged it the way someone hugs a lie they've told too long. I slid the phone under the blanket, pressed it against my thigh to dim the light, and stared into the dark, trying to decide which pain I was about to choose. The pain of knowing or the pain of pretending. Because in that moment, I understood something with icy clarity. The bed wasn't just where we slept. It was where he hid the truth. And I was lying right beside it. The phone stayed warm in my palm, as if it had its own heartbeat. I kept it under the blanket, pressed to my thigh, letting the glow leak through the fabric in a weak, guilty light. Beside me, my husband slept with the confidence of someone who believed the night belonged to him. I whispered, "Put it back," like saying it would rewind time and restore the bed to what it used to mean. But the lock screen kept lighting up, little flickers from someone who wasn't me. Each buzz was small, polite, and still it hit like a slap. The safest choice was to roll over and pretend. The braver choice was to learn what he'd hidden under our pillow. Bravery didn't feel heroic. It felt like refusing to drown quietly. I tapped the screen. A keypad appeared. Of course he had a passcode. The dots waited, blank and patient. My mind sprinted through numbers. The old code he'd used for years, his birthday, our anniversary. I tried them anyway. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Each failure felt like a door shutting in my face, not just on the phone, but on the version of him I'd lived beside. I glanced at him, lashes on his cheeks, mouth slightly open, peaceful. He looked harmless in sleep, and the contrast made me sick. How could someone look so calm while hiding a second life inches from my hand? His hand lay between us, heavy with sleep. His thumb, the same thumb that traced circles on my wrist when I was anxious, rested loose against the sheet. The thought arrived like ice. Use his fingerprint. I hated myself for it. I hated him more for making it an option. Slowly, carefully, I lifted his hand. He shifted, mumbled, then settled again. I guided his thumb to the glass. The phone unlocked. For a stunned second, I just stared, waiting for the screen to slam shut. It didn't. It opened to a clean home screen, no wallpaper, no photos, no personality. This wasn't a spare. This was a tool built for secrecy. Maybe it's work, I begged my own mind. Maybe it's something complicated. Maybe I'm overreacting. I tapped the Messages app. A list of threads appeared. Numbers without names, initials, no profile pictures. It looked like a hallway of locked doors. One conversation sat pinned at the top. M. My chest tightened. I didn't know who M was. My body already understood the danger. I opened it. The first messages didn't explode. They seeped. M, you still awake? Him, yeah. M, she asleep. Him, she's right here. M, that turns me on. The room went thin around me. She's right here. I was a pronoun, a background object in my own bed. I scrolled, because stopping would mean choosing ignorance, and ignorance suddenly felt like another way to betray myself. M, when can I see you again? Him soon, I'll make an excuse. M, I hate sharing you. Him, be patient. My stomach rolled. Heat rose behind my eyes. I pressed my knuckles to my lips to keep the sound inside. I told myself there had to be a misunderstanding. Then I saw the dates. Yesterday, 2 days ago, an hour ago. This wasn't old history. It was happening now, even as he slept beside me. I kept scrolling. Did you send it? Him, yeah, don't use your main account. You're reckless. Him, you like it. Money without saying money. Transfers, warnings, quick confirmations. My mind flashed to his sudden speeches about cutting back. The way he'd watched my spending like a hawk while insisting we needed to be smart. Smart for who? A photo loaded skin shadow, a body posed like a dare. Then another. I scrolled past fast as if speed could make it hurt less, but the images still burned behind my eyes. And then a line that turned my mouth to dust. Him, tell me you wore the blue dress. The one you like. Him, the one that makes you look like trouble. The blue dress. Last week he'd held it up from the laundry and smiled at me. Wear this Friday, he'd said. I want to take you somewhere nice. I felt chosen, desired. Now I understood. He wasn't picturing me. He was rehearsing her, using my life like a practice run. The betrayal shifted, becoming heavier than lust. It wasn't just what he did. It was how he used me to do it. I scrolled further, searching for a point where this could still be forgivable. Instead, it got casual, cruel in its ease. Does she suspect? Him, she's too trusting. Poor thing. Him, don't feel bad, she's comfortable. That's all she ever wanted. Comfortable, like I was furniture he could set in place. A new message popped up while I stared, bright and fresh. Tomorrow. Him, if I can get away. I told her I'm working late. Tomorrow was the night he'd promised dinner together, like a small ceremony. I'd already planned it in my head, wine, the meal he liked, the quiet moment I thought belonged to us. I was planning us, he was scheduling her. My hands turned cold. I scrolled back weeks, then months, desperate to find the beginning. It was there, the same excuses, the same coded meetups. Usual spot. Delete after. Can't talk, she's here. This wasn't a mistake. It was maintenance. And then, buried in the thread like a blade, was the message that changed the air in the room. What if she finds out? Him, then I'll say she's unstable. No one will believe her. She's emotional. My vision tunneled. Unstable, emotional, not just an insult, a plan. A way to erase me without leaving bruises. I thought of every time I'd cried and he'd sighed like I was exhausting. Every time he'd said, "You're overthinking," while my instincts begged to be heard. He wasn't afraid of hurting me. He was afraid of being caught, and he'd already decided how to bury me if I spoke. I lowered the phone, palms slick, and listened to him breathe. He exhaled, peaceful, as if he hadn't written my future in that cold sentence. In our bed, the one place I believed was sacred, I was holding evidence that love had been replaced with strategy. I knew then that confronting him with emotion would be exactly what he expected. Emotion was the weapon he planned to point back at me. If I wanted to survive this, I needed more than heartbreak. I needed proof, dates, receipts, screenshots, something solid enough to outlast his lies. So I raised the phone again, thumb poised to dig deeper, not because I wanted to torture myself, but because the truth had a shape, and I was going to learn every edge of it before it cut me again for good. I didn't sleep. I lay there with the second phone dimmed beneath the blanket and my own phone on the nightstand like a witness that didn't know what it had seen. My husband's breathing stayed soft and even, the sound of a man at peace. Mine came in shallow pieces, as if my ribs had turned into a cage. At some point, the shock stopped feeling like electricity and started feeling like math. If he'd built a second life, it had to leave traces, not feelings, facts, patterns, logistics, the kind of evidence you can hold up when someone tries to rewrite you as unstable and emotional. I hated that I was thinking like this, like a detective in my own marriage. But I hated more that he'd force me into it. I waited for another message to buzz. Nothing. Just the ceiling fan, just the dark, just the slow unfolding of a truth that had been folded neatly under a pillow. I opened the thread again and scrolled higher, past the latest heat and cruelty. The dates started to line up with memories in my head, and that's when the floor really gave way. Thursday, 7:48 p.m., usual spot. That was the night he'd had to stay late because a project was falling behind. I remembered microwaving leftovers and eating alone at the counter, trying to be the kind of wife who didn't make everything about herself. Saturday, 11 p.m., I'll tell her I'm going to the gym. That was the day he came home sweaty, kissed my forehead, and said, "I'm trying to be healthier for us." I'd smiled like love was simple. Tuesday, 9:03 a.m., delete after you read. That was the morning he'd insisted on taking the trash out early, like he couldn't stand the house holding anything unnecessary. The betrayal wasn't just that he'd touched someone else. It was that he'd used my trust as the fuel to keep the machine running. I started making a map in my mind, connecting his excuses to their conversations like pins on a board. The work trips that never had receipts. The quick errands that turned into 3 hours. The sudden need for privacy when he used to leave his phone charging anywhere. I flipped through other message threads, numbers without names, initials that meant nothing to me until they did. J asked for a time. K sent a location pin. R replied with a single heart and a photo of a hotel keycard. Some threads were scrubbed down to almost nothing, the way someone cleans after a crime. But even the emptiness said something: discipline. He wasn't careless, he was practiced. In the gallery, the photos loaded in bursts, each one a small detonation. Screenshots of conversations I'd never be allowed to see. Selfies of him in places he'd never mentioned, smirking in a car I didn't recognize, wearing a shirt he told me he donated. A mirror photo in a bathroom with gray tile that wasn't ours. A picture of a receipt half-cropped as if he'd meant to keep it, then remembered. I zoomed in with trembling fingers. Hotel name, date, a checkout time that matched the morning he'd gone in early. My throat tightened so hard it hurt to swallow. The bed, the home, the years, they were all being measured against a timeline that didn't include me. I went to the phone's notes app. There were lists, not romantic ones, lists like a businessman keeping inventory. New SIM top-up. Delete photos weekly. Turn off location. Backup to cloud, separate email. Cash withdrawals, keep under 200. I stared at those words until they blurred. A system, a set of rules, betrayal with a user manual. A memory surfaced, him standing in our kitchen, tapping his own phone and frowning at me. "Why do you have your location services on all the time?" he'd asked, like he was concerned about my privacy. I'd laughed. "So you can find me if I get kidnapped," I said. He hadn't laughed back. Now I understood. He wasn't protecting me. He was studying how to disappear. I opened the calendar on the second phone, and my hands actually went numb. There were events, bland titles. Meeting, client, call, gym. A parade of normal. But when I clicked into them, the details were wrong. The locations weren't offices, they were addresses, intersections, hotels. Some had coded notes. Bring it and blue and no perfume. I compared them to my own calendar in my head, the mental one every spouse keeps. Anniversary dinner canceled because he got called in. Sunday brunch missed because he didn't feel well. Every time I'd adjusted, accommodated, forgiven, those were coordinates on his secret map. The cruelest part was how ordinary it looked. On the surface, he was a man with appointments. Beneath it, he was running 2 lives like parallel tracks, making sure they never crossed in daylight. I dug into the email accounts next, half hopping I'd hit a wall, half terrified I wouldn't. There were 2 addresses I didn't recognize, both stripped of his name. One inbox held confirmation emails, ride shares, hotel bookings, a jewelry store newsletter, and a discreet delivery service with a plain subject line that made my stomach twist. The other inbox held something worse: drafts. Drafts are what people write when they don't want a record of sending. They were unsent messages, rehearsals, apologies with no intention. and one draft, short and sharp, that looked like a script for a fight. If you're going to accuse me, you need proof. You're imagining things again. You're projecting. I can't live like this. He had lines ready. He'd practiced making me the problem. I thought about confronting him right then, shaking him awake and holding the phone in his face. But I could already hear his voice, calm and disappointed. He'd built his system with the assumption that I would react like a wounded wife, emotion, tears, desperation. And he would call that instability. So I did something that felt unnatural, like swallowing fire without making a sound. I started collecting. I took screenshots of the worst lines. I photographed the calendar entries with the hotel addresses. I captured the notes app lists. I sent copies to an email account he didn't know existed, one I created years ago and forgot, now suddenly precious. Each click felt like stepping further away from the marriage I thought I had, but also closer to something solid, the truth. At 3 a.m, my hands cramped and my eyes burned. I set the phone down and stared at my husband's back. He shifted, hugged his pillow, and for a second I saw it clearly, how he'd been sleeping on his secrets like they were soft. Love, I realized, had been my language. Logistics had been his. And if he could run betrayal like a business, then whatever I'd find next, the message that truly made me sick, wouldn't be an accident. It would be part of the plan. I tucked it under the pillow, knowing the next scroll would show me how far he'd go. I thought I'd already seen the worst of him. I thought the deepest wound was discovering he could crawl into our bed, kiss my shoulder, and then text someone else about how it turned them on that I was right there. Cheating felt like a knife. The cruelty felt like salt. I didn't yet understand there are betrayals that don't just break your heart, they aim for your future. Morning arrived like a staged performance. Pale light slid across the curtains, making everything look clean and ordinary. My husband yawned, stretched, and brushed his lips against my temple. He asked if I wanted pancakes this weekend. He reminded me about the electricity bill. He laughed at a video on his real phone, the one he let the world see. I smiled in the places a wife is supposed to smile, but inside me something was counting. Every tenderness now sounded like cover. When he left for work, he patted his pillow, like he was checking that his secret was still breathing. The moment the door clicked shut, I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the cold tile. The hidden phone felt heavier than it had in the dark. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped it. I told myself I was doing this for closure. The truth was simpler. My body couldn't live in maybe. I opened the messages and searched for my name. Nothing. Not once. I wasn't a person in his second life. I was she. Her. The situation. Like a problem he managed, not a woman he loved. I searched for money, and the screen filled with results. A thread labeled T opened, and right at the top was a screenshot of our joint savings account. The number we'd built slowly, vacations postponed, new clothes delayed, me saying no to little joys because we were being responsible. Under the screenshot, my husband had typed, "Got it, that's the cushion." The cushion, like our savings were a landing pad for a fall he'd already planned. T, you sure she won't notice? Him, she doesn't check, she trusts me. T, how much you moving? Him, start small, cash back, then the big hit after I set the stage. Set the stage. I clicked the attached bank notification he'd forwarded to himself and saw a chain of tiny withdrawals, $40 here, $60 there, hidden as cash back at stores I recognized because I'd been with him. Groceries, hardware. The same errands where he'd squeezed my hand in the parking lot and said, "We're doing good, babe." He'd been siphoning our safety in teaspoons, counting on my trust like a blindfold. Love was what I offered. Accounting was what he practiced. And every receipt in my memory felt like evidence. I reread it until my throat tightened and my stomach rolled. My breathing sounded too loud in the small room. T, what stage? Him, make it look like she's spiraling. Paper trail matters. If she loses it first. I'm clean. Spiraling, clean, paper trail. The words weren't emotional, they were operational. He wasn't confessing a mistake. He was describing a process. I scrolled, slow as if speed would make it real. Him been logging her episodes, screenshots when she's emotional, notes. T, judges hate drama. Him exactly. I'm the calm one, she's the unstable one. A laugh tried to escape me, sharp, disbelieving, but it died in my throat. I thought of every time I'd cried and he'd sighed like I was tiring him out. Every time he said, "You're overthinking," while my instincts begged to be heard. He hadn't been soothing me. He'd been collecting my softness like evidence. T, and if she accuses you. Him, I'll say she's paranoid. Projecting, classic. T, you talk to a lawyer. Him, consultation. He said documentation is everything. File first, control the story. My hands went cold. File first. Control the story. The same man who used to hold my face and promise we were a team had already started drafting the ending where I was the villain. Then I saw the line that made me gag into my palm. Him, if it gets messy, I'll push for a therapy eval. Concerned husband angle, she'll crack, I just stay calm. Concerned husband. Like a costume he could put on over the damage he'd caused. Like my tears would prove I was broken, not betrayed. I set the phone in my lap and stared at the bathroom rug, trying to find something, anything, that would make this less true. My chest hurt in a real, physical way, like grief had hands. But I couldn't stop. Not now. If he was capable of this, I needed to know how far he'd go. I searched for kid. We don't have children, but we'd been talking about it. Soft conversations over dinner, careful hopes. We made lists. We joked about names we liked but didn't say too loudly, like the universe might overhear. The results pulled me back to M. M, what if you get her pregnant? That ruins everything. Him, it won't, I'm careful. M, I don't want to share you forever. Him, you won't have to. There was a pause, then his message appeared like a stain spreading. Him, honestly, if it happens, it helps. Makes her easier to manage, and if she leaves, she looks like the villain. I went completely still. Easier to manage, like I was an animal, like a baby would be a leash. M, that's messed up. Him, it's realistic. Plus, child support keeps her busy. She won't have time to chase me. The nausea returned, but beneath it was something worse. The collapse of every innocent someday we'd shared. He'd turned motherhood, something I'd held tenderly in my imagination, into a strategy, a distraction, a trap. I scrolled again, because once you realize someone has no integrity, you start hunting for the boundary they won't cross. You want to find it like proof there's still a human core inside them. There was. M, she's not even that pretty. Why stay? Him, because it's comfortable, and she pays half the bills. Don't be childish. M, wow. Him, I'm playing it smart. I'll be out clean with my money and you. She'll be healing, and everyone will pity her. That was the sickest message. Not the insult, not even the affair. It was the calm certainty that he could dismantle my life, steal from my future, and then narrate it as his virtue. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Same face, same eyes, but something behind them had shifted. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was awake. Love without integrity isn't love. It's leverage. It's a person studying your tenderness to figure out where to press. I wiped my cheeks, only then realizing they were wet. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart, not yet, because the moment he knew I knew, his system would activate. He'd delete. He'd deny. He'd charm. And when that failed, he'd point to my tears and call them proof. So I took screenshots until my thumb ached. I forwarded them to the secret email. I saved copies in places he'd never think to look. Each file felt like an anchor thrown into a storm. Then I washed my face, practiced breathing like a normal woman in a normal marriage, and walked out with a new kind of silence in my throat. Not the silence of fear, the silence of strategy. That night, I learned the most dangerous thing about betrayal. It doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it slips into your life wearing your husband's smile, asking what you want for dinner. When he came home, he kissed me like he always did, quick, casual, familiar. His hands landed on my waist with the same lazy ownership that used to make me feel wanted. Now it made my skin crawl, because I could still see his words on that second phone like a bruise behind my eyes. You're comfortable. That's all she ever wanted. She's emotional, unstable. File first, control the story. He hung his keys on the hook, loosened his tie, and sighed like a man who'd carried the whole world all day. I watched him perform his life, the one I had believed in, while the other life sat folded neatly under his pillow like a weapon he slept on. How was your day? He asked, already walking to the fridge. It was fine, I said. My voice sounded normal. That terrified me more than tears would have. Because inside, I was shaking so hard my bones felt like they might rattle. He started talking about work, about some coworker who messed something up, and he laughed. I found the right moments to nod. I even smiled once, a small curve of my mouth that felt like stepping on glass. This was my first act of war, staying soft on the outside while something sharp formed inside me. In my head, I kept hearing my own instincts pleading, just ask him, just confront him, just blow it up and be done. But I'd seen his draft messages, his practiced lines, the way he planned to turn my pain into a diagnosis. If I confronted him raw, he would call it hysteria. If I screamed, he would call it instability. If I begged, he would call it manipulation. He'd designed the game so that any emotional response became evidence against me. So I did the one thing he didn't expect. I went quiet. Not silent like a victim, silent like a strategist. I cooked dinner. That sounds so small, so domestic, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I stood at the stove, flipping chicken in a pan, while my stomach rolled with nausea. The scent of garlic and oil rose in warm waves, and my body wanted to reject it like it was poison. I kept my breathing steady anyway. I sprinkled salt like a woman who wasn't holding proof of her own erasure. He sat at the table scrolling his real phone, occasionally chuckling and turning the screen away from me out of habit. That little turn, so casual, made my grip on the spatula tighten until my knuckles turned white. "What are you laughing at?" I asked lightly, like it didn't matter, like my heart wasn't cracking open. "Just something stupid," he said, and he didn't show me. Of course he didn't. We ate together. We talked about bills. We talked about the neighbor's loud dog. He asked me if I'd called my mother back. Ordinary words fell between us like dust covering a crime scene. At one point, he reached across the table and brushed my hand. "You seem quiet," he said, concerned husband voice, soft, almost sweet. My chest tightened. Was this him testing me? Was he checking if the stage was set? Was he already collecting my episodes, labeling my silence as a symptom? "I'm just tired," I said, and I let my eyes soften. I gave him the easiest explanation, the one that didn't invite questions. He nodded like he accepted it. Then he said, "You should rest more. You've been stressed lately." He said it like a diagnosis, casual and confident, and I felt the trap click into place. There it was, the narrative he wanted. Not betrayed wife, stressed wife, emotional wife, the one who might spiral. I swallowed my anger with a sip of water so cold it hurt. Then I nodded, obedient. "You're right," I whispered. And in that moment, my weakness became something else. Because he thought he was winning. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen while he watched TV. I loaded the dishwasher and listened to the laughter track from some sitcom like it was mocking me. My hands moved automatically, rinse, stack, close, while my mind kept mapping. If he was draining our savings, I needed records. If he'd consulted a lawyer, I needed a timeline. If he planned to frame me as unstable, I needed proof that I was calm, methodical, intact. So I began keeping my own quiet documentation. Not in a dramatic notebook with red circles like a movie detective. In my phone, in a hidden folder, I started a log. 7:12 p.m. he arrived home, kissed me. 7:25 p.m. he turned screen away twice. 8:03 p.m. mentioned I'm stressed lately. 8:41 p.m. went to bathroom with phone. Each detail felt ridiculous until I remembered his notes app lists, his discipline. If he could build a case against me out of my tears, I could build one out of his patterns. When he went to shower, I didn't rush to the bedroom like a thief. I walked calmly, like I was going to grab pajamas. My heart pounded anyway, a frantic animal against my ribs. The pillow was right where he'd left it, and under it the phone. I slid it out with the same care you used to remove a sleeping snake from your bed. Locked again. My breath caught. For a second, panic surged. Had he changed something? Had he noticed? Then I remembered his thumb. I moved fast but gentle, slipping into the bathroom doorway where steam fogged the mirror. He stood under the water, eyes closed, hair slicked back, so vulnerable he looked like the man I married. For one dangerous second, my heart tried to soften. I almost hated myself for it. Then I thought of the message. File first, control the story. I reached into the shower curtain gap, just enough to take his hand. "What?" he murmured, half asleep under the water. "Nothing," I said, smiling, voice light. "I just wanted to feel you." His mouth curved, pleased. He offered his hand like it was a gift. I guided his thumb to the phone screen, hidden behind my body. Unlocked. I stepped away before he could see what I was doing. He stayed in the shower, oblivious, humming to himself like he wasn't the storm in my life. Back in the bedroom, I worked quickly. I searched his email again, looking for the lawyer's name. I found it. A consultation confirmation, subject line bland, time stamped 2 weeks ago, right around the night he'd picked a fight over nothing, then apologized with flowers. I'd thought the flowers were love. They were guilt management. Or worse, they were insurance. I took screenshots, saved them, sent them to my hidden email. My hands moved with a calm that didn't match the hurricane in my chest. Then I went back further in the bank notifications. More small withdrawals, more cashback. A pattern so careful it looked like someone trying not to leave footprints. He wasn't just cheating, he was extracting. A thought hit me so hard I had to sit down. He doesn't just want to leave. He wants to leave with my money and my reputation in his pocket. I closed my eyes until the dizziness passed. Tears rose, hot and urgent, but I didn't let them fall, not yet. Tears felt like blood in shark water. I needed to stay dry. When he walked back into the room, towel around his waist, he looked at me and grinned. "You're cute when you're quiet," he said, like I was a pet. I laughed. The sound came out a little strangled, but he didn't notice. He never noticed me unless I made noise. He climbed into bed, tucked the pillow under his head, and I watched him settle on top of his secret again. His arm reached for me, pulling me closer, and I let it happen. I let him hold me because if I flinched, he'd feel it. If I pulled away, he'd ask why. If I cracked, he'd start building his story. So I lay still in his arms, staring into the dark, memorizing the weight of the lie wrapped around me. And while he drifted off, I made a promise to myself, so quiet it didn't even need words. I would not give him the reaction he wanted. I would give him the consequence he deserved. Because sometimes strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it smiles, washes the dishes, climbs into bed, and waits, collecting every piece of truth until it's ready to strike clean. And the next day, when he left for work with a kiss and a casual, "Love you," I smiled back like I believed him. Then I watched him drive away, and I began planning who I could trust, because silence had kept me alive, but I couldn't do the next part alone. I used to think secrets were something you kept to protect love, surprise parties, private worries, the little soft truths you only whisper in the dark. I didn't understand there were secrets that rot you from the inside, that turn your own silence into a cage. By the third day of pretending, my body started to betray me in quieter ways. I'd smile at my husband's jokes and then run water too long in the kitchen just to steady my breathing. I'd answer his questions in the right tone while my hands trembled under the table. At night, I'd lie beside him and stare at the ceiling until my eyes burned, listening to him sleep like a man who'd never done anything wrong. The loneliness was its own kind of cruelty, being in a house with someone and realizing you're alone anyway. That's what pushed me to tell someone, not anger, not drama, survival. I chose Lena. Lena had been my friend since before I knew my husband. The kind of friend who doesn't flinch when life gets ugly, who asks hard questions and doesn't accept pretty lies as answers. She was steady in a way I used to envy, like she'd built herself from stone and kindness. If anyone could hold my truth without dropping it, it was her. Still, when I typed her name into my phone, my thumb hovered above the call button like it weighed a pound. Because the moment you tell someone, it becomes real. And once it's real, it can spread. It can leak. It can reach him. He had a plan. He had scripts. He had a system. I had screenshots and a shaking heart. So before I called, I made preparations like someone bracing for a storm. I opened my hidden email and checked that every screenshot had been sent and saved. I uploaded duplicates to a cloud drive under a name that looked boring. Taxes 2023. Because I'd learned he never looked at what he thought he already understood. I took photos of the second phone's calendar entries and hotel receipts again, just in case he wiped it before I could. Then I went through our shared accounts. Joint checking, joint savings, credit card, streaming services, the little threads that tie two lives together until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. I changed my banking password first, quietly, in the bathroom with the faucet running. I added two-factor authentication to my personal email. I checked our phone plan and realized he was the primary account holder. My stomach clenched. He could see logs, locations, calls. That meant this call to Lena couldn't be on my phone. I grabbed my keys, slid them into my pocket, and told myself I was going to get groceries. My voice didn't shake when I told him. He looked up from his phone. "Want me to come?" "No," I said too fast, then softened it. "I just need a quick run." He watched me for half a second longer than normal, and I held my face steady. Outward calm, inward collapse, I'd become good at that. When I got in my car, I didn't drive straight to the store. I drove 3 blocks away and parked behind a small strip of shops where I knew the signal was spotty and the cameras weren't pointed right at the street. My hands were cold on the steering wheel. I sat there breathing like I'd run a mile. Then I walked into a coffee shop and asked, casually, if I could borrow their phone charger because mine was dying. The barista pointed to the counter where a little charging station sat like a gift. I plugged in my phone and left it there, face down, like I didn't care if it lived or died. Then I used the coffee shop's landline. My heart hammered as I dialed Lena's number from memory, 1 digit at a time, like each one was a step off a cliff. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, everything okay?" That simple question nearly broke me. Everything okay? Like the world still believed in okay. "Can you talk?" I asked, and my voice came out thin. "Of course," she said immediately. "What's going on?" I glanced around the coffee shop. People sat laughing over laptops, stirring sugar into their drinks like they had no idea my life was changing in a corner booth. "I found something," I began. My mouth went dry. "I found a second phone hidden under his pillow." There was a beat of silence on her end, but it wasn't the stunned silence of someone who didn't understand. It was the focused silence of someone turning on a light. "A second phone," she repeated carefully. "Yes," my fingers clenched around the receiver. "And the messages, Lena, they're not just cheating." "Okay," she said, calm. "Breathe. Tell me what you saw." I swallowed hard, and the words spilled out in fragments. "He has notes, like rules. He's moving money. He's talking about making me look unstable. He said no one would believe me. My throat tightened. He called our savings the cushion." "Jesus," Lena whispered, and her voice cracked for the first time. I closed my eyes. A tear finally escaped, sliding down my cheek hot and silent. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do," she said, firm now. "You're already doing it. You're gathering proof. You're staying calm. That's good. That's smart." Hearing someone say it, hearing someone validate my strategy instead of calling me crazy, felt like air after being underwater. But fear still sat in my gut like a stone. What if he finds out I told you? What if he flips it? He's planning to. "Then we make sure he can't," she said. "First question, does he have access to your phone plan, your bank, your email?" "All of it," I admitted. Or some of it, he's primary on the phone plan. Okay, she said. Then you don't use your phone for anything sensitive. Not calls, not texts, not notes. Assume he can see everything. My pulse spiked, but it was the good kind of spike, the kind that comes with direction. Second, she continued, you need a go bag. I almost laughed. It sounded dramatic, like something from a movie. But the second I thought of his message, control the story, my laugh died. I can do that, I said quietly. ID, cash, a spare card if you have one, meds, a change of clothes, she listed, methodical. And keep it somewhere he won't find. Not the closet, not the car. My trunk, I said automatically. No, she snapped, sharper than I'd ever heard her. If he has your car keys, he has your trunk. Hide it at my place, or your sister, someone you trust. I pictured Lena's apartment, the spare closet, the key under her mat. Relief hit me so hard my chest ached. Okay, I whispered. Okay. And listen, she said, lowering her voice. You need to think about who else might be involved. That thread T, who is that? A friend? Family? Someone at work? I don't know, I admitted. Just an initial and numbers, no names. Then don't assume you're safe, she said. If he's been consulting a lawyer, he might have someone feeding him information. If you tell the wrong person, it will get back to him. The coffee shop suddenly felt too open, too bright. I scanned faces like any of them could be connected to him, like Betrayal had a network. I'm scared, I said, and the honesty in my voice surprised me. I'd been so controlled, so quiet. But with Lena, my fear didn't feel like weakness. It felt like reality. I know, she said softly, but you're not alone anymore, okay? You're not doing this in your head by yourself. Something in my lungs loosened. Not much, just enough to breathe. Can you meet me? I asked. Yes, she said instantly. Tonight, but not at your house. Choose somewhere neutral. And don't drive straight from home, go somewhere else first. Make it look normal. Okay, I repeated, clinging to the steps like a railing. And one more thing, Lena added, voice firm again. Do not confront him yet, not until you're ready and protected. He's counting on you exploding. Don't give him the gift. I stared at my reflection in the dark window of the coffee shop. My eyes looked bigger than I remembered. My face looked like someone who'd seen behind a curtain and couldn't go back. I won't, I said. I promise. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter. Not because the betrayal hurt less. If anything, it hurt more now that it had been spoken aloud. But because I could finally feel a thread of loyalty in the middle of all this poison. I unplugged my phone, left the coffee shop, and drove to the grocery store like I'd promised. Basket, milk, bread, normal. When I got home, my husband glanced at the bags and smiled. Hey, babe, he said, like we were still the couple in the safe story. I smiled back steady. Hey. But as I put the groceries away, I started quietly removing the first pieces of my life from his reach. A passport from a drawer. A spare key. A little envelope of cash I'd forgotten I had. Isolation had been his advantage. Support was going to be mine. And as night fell and he climbed into bed with his secrets under his pillow, I lay beside him, listening to him breathe, thinking of Lena waiting on the other side of the city, thinking of the go bag I'd build, thinking of the next step. Because now there were two realities in my life. The one he performed, and the one I was preparing to escape. The night I met Lena, I left my house with a smile on my face and a storm in my stomach. I told my husband I was going to pick up a prescription. He didn't even look up from his phone, just waved and said, "Drive safe," like he was a good man who worried about his wife. I drove in a loop anyway, twice around the neighborhood, then out to a main road, then back through a different street, like the routes mattered, like the map could protect me. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting his car to appear behind me, because once you learn someone has a secret life, you start believing they can be everywhere. Lena was waiting in the corner booth of a diner near the highway, bright lights, too many people, too public for drama. Perfect. She slid me a coffee and didn't ask questions at first. She just held my gaze like she was anchoring me. I showed her the screenshots, the calendar entries, the lawyer confirmation, the cushion, the line about making me look unstable. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She got quiet in a way that made my skin prickle. "This is deliberate," she said finally, voice low. "This is a plan." "I know," I whispered, and my hands shook as I wrapped them around the mug. "I feel like I'm living in a house built on a lie." "You are," she said. Then she leaned forward. "Which means you have to act like someone who lives in a house that might collapse." She helped me build the go bag that night. Not physically, we couldn't risk that, but in a list I memorized like prayer. She told me where to keep copies of documents. She told me to stop using any shared devices. She told me to assume he could see more than I thought. And then she said something that stayed, lodged in my chest like a warning bell. "He's going to notice," she said. "Even if you act normal, he'll feel the shift. Men like that, people like that don't miss changes in their control." I nodded like I understood. I didn't understand how fast it would happen. The next morning, my husband woke up before me. That alone was unusual. He usually hit snooze 3 times and complained about the day like it was personally attacking him. But when I opened my eyes, he was already dressed, already smelling like cologne, sitting at the edge of the bed. He turned and smiled at me, wide and bright, too bright. "Morning, beautiful," he said. A pet name, a warm tone, the kind of thing that used to soften me. Now it felt like bait. He kissed my forehead, then my cheek, then, lingering, my lips. His hand slid along my jaw as if he was reminding himself of the shape of me. I stayed still, letting my face remain neutral, letting my body do the performance Lena and I had planned. "You seem far away lately," he murmured. There it was, the first probe. "I'm fine," I said lightly, "just tired." He studied me for a fraction of a second too long, then smiled like he believed me. "I hate when you're stressed," he said. "I worry about you." Concerned husband voice again, soft, polished, ready. He stood up and walked toward the closet. "I'm going to take you out this weekend," he said. "Somewhere nice, just us, sound good." My stomach twisted. The weekend. The same weekend he'd been planning with her. "Sure," I said, and I let my smile reach my eyes like I meant it. He beamed, satisfied, as if he'd placed a hand back on the steering wheel. Then, casually, like it meant nothing, he lifted his pillow and shook it out. I felt my pulse spike so hard it made my vision blur. He smoothed the pillowcase, tucked the corner beneath, and set it back down with a little pat, precise, careful. Like he was making sure something underneath didn't shift. When he finally left for work, he kissed me again and said, "Text me if you need anything." Then he paused at the doorway and added, "And try not to overthink today, okay?" Overthink. The word slid into the air like a needle. When the door closed, I moved to the bed like I was on autopilot. My hands were already reaching under the pillow before my mind caught up. Nothing. The second phone was gone. My throat tightened so suddenly I couldn't breathe for a moment. The empty space beneath the pillow felt like a missing tooth, sharp, undeniable. He knew. Or he suspected. Either way, the trap door had opened, and I could feel the floor beneath my normal life starting to shift. I stood there staring at the pillow like it could explain itself. Then I forced myself to move. Panic is loud. Panic leaves fingerprints. I remembered Lena's voice. Do not give him the reaction he wants. So I made coffee. I ate toast. I folded laundry. I did normal things with shaking hands because normal was camouflage. But in my head, my thoughts were sprinting. Had he checked the second phone? Had he seen anything that hinted I'd been in it? Had he noticed a screenshot count, a changed setting, a fingerprint log? Or was this just him moving his secret to a safer hiding place? The worst possibility pressed against my ribs. Had he already begun setting the stage harder? Had he already started telling people I was stressed, unstable, spiraling? By afternoon, he texted me from his real phone. "Busy day, you okay?" My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could hear him saying it in that gentle tone, as if he cared. But now every kindness looked like an angle. I replied, all good, just cleaning, love you. I hated myself for typing the last 2 words, but I hated more the idea of him sensing the drop in warmth. My love had become a mask. He came home earlier than usual. I heard his keys before I saw him, the familiar jingle that used to mean safety. Now it meant an inspection. Hey, he called, too cheerful. In the kitchen, I answered, stirring soup I didn't want. He walked in and wrapped his arms around me from behind, pressing his face into my neck. He inhaled like he was drinking me in. You smell good, he whispered. My spine went rigid for half a second. Then I forced it to relax. Outward calm, inward alarms. He kissed my shoulder. I missed you. Long day, I asked. Yeah, he said, and his hands slid to my hips. But I was thinking about you. A pause, then, are you mad at me? The question hit like a hook in the water. It was too specific, too sudden. No, I said quickly, then softened it. Why would I be mad? He shrugged, still holding me. I don't know, you've just been quiet. I turned around slowly, meeting his eyes. His gaze was warm on the surface, but underneath it I saw something new, alertness, like he was listening for a crack in my story. I told you, I said, gentle. I'm tired. He smiled as if relieved, but his eyes stayed sharp. You know you can tell me anything, right? He said, voice syrupy. Anything at all. I felt the urge to laugh, wild and bitter. Instead, I nodded. Of course. We ate dinner at the table. He asked questions, small ones, harmless ones, about my day, where I went, who I talked to, what I bought. He didn't say it like an interrogation. That's what made it worse. He said it like a husband making conversation. I went to the grocery store, I said. Did some cleaning, that's it. And you didn't go anywhere else? He asked, still smiling. My heart thudded. I kept my face smooth. No. He nodded slowly, as if filing it away. Good, he said, and then he laughed. I worry about you driving around too much. You get anxious. There it was, the narrative again. Concern, worry, anxiety, not his control, my fragility. That night when we climbed into bed, he was unusually affectionate. He spooned me tight, his arm heavy across my waist, his mouth at my ear. You're mine, he whispered. It would have sounded romantic once. Now it sounded like ownership. I lay there, breathing shallowly, feeling his heartbeat against my back. My mind kept flashing to the empty space under the pillow. Where was the phone? What was he protecting now? I needed to test him. Lena had said, small questions, small traps, nothing explosive, just enough to measure the lie. So the next morning, while he drank coffee and scrolled his phone, I kept my tone casual. Hey, I said, rinsing a mug. Did you change something with your phone plan? He didn't look up. What do you mean? I don't know, I said lightly. My signal was weird yesterday. I thought maybe the account did something. He finally glanced at me, eyebrows lifting in mild annoyance. No, he said easily. Nothing changed. Smooth, immediate, no hesitation, like he'd been waiting for that kind of question. I nodded and kept my eyes on the sink. Okay. Then I added, still casual, I was thinking about switching providers, maybe getting on my own plan. It might be cheaper. The air shifted, not dramatically, just a tiny tightening like a thread pulled taut. He set his phone down. Why would you do that? His tone stayed light, but the warmth thinned. I don't know, I said, shrugging. Just thinking. He stared at me for a beat too long. Then he smiled, a soft, patient smile that felt rehearsed. Babe, he said, you don't need to complicate things. You're always looking for problems where there aren't any. My stomach dropped. I'm not looking for problems, I said carefully. He laughed. You kind of are. Then he reached out and brushed my cheek like he was soothing a child. You've been anxious lately. I can tell. You get these ideas and then you spiral. Spiral. The word landed hard. It wasn't just a word. It was a label. A seed he wanted to plant in the ground between us so it could grow into something that would choke me later. I forced myself to keep my face neutral. I'm not spiraling, I said. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly, still smiling. "See," he said softly. "This is what I mean. You're tense, you're defensive." I stared at him, feeling the reality in my pocket, screenshots, timestamps, proof pressing against his performance. The contrast made me dizzy. I had truth. He had tone. He leaned back in his chair. "Did something happen?" he asked, voice gentle. "Did someone say something to you? Because you're acting different." Different, not wrong, not right. Different like a threat. I shook my head. Nothing happened. He watched me for another long moment. Then he exhaled like I'd disappointed him. "Okay," he said. "I just don't want you making up stories in your head again." Again. As if this was a pattern of mine. As if paranoia was my personality, not a response to his betrayal. A heat rose behind my eyes, sharp and urgent. I wanted to slam my phone down on the table and show him everything. I wanted to watch his face change. I wanted to rip the mask off. But I saw the trap. If I exploded, he'd step back and say, calmly, "This is exactly what I'm talking about." He'd turn my pain into proof. So I did the hardest thing. I swallowed it. I softened my shoulders. I let my mouth curve into something close to a smile. "You're right," I said quietly. "I've just been tired." His whole body relaxed just a fraction. Victory. He stood up, kissed my forehead, and said, "Get some rest today. I'll be home early. We can have a nice night." Nice night. Like he hadn't just tried to convince me I was unstable for wanting basic independence. When he left for work, I stood at the window and watched his car disappear. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From rage. Because now I knew he'd started. He'd moved his secret phone. He'd tightened his grip. He'd tested the waters of gaslighting, sprinkling words like anxious and spiral, and again into our conversations like poison you're supposed to swallow without noticing. And if I didn't move carefully, he would turn my own voice into the weapon that silenced me. I picked up my hidden email, checked that my files were still there, and then I texted Lena from a burner number she'd helped me set up, one I kept turned off and hidden in a box of old shoes. "He's noticing. Phone is gone. He's starting to call me anxious and spiraling." A minute later, her reply came through. "Good, that means you're close. Stay calm. Next step needs to protect you." I read it twice, breathing slowly until my heartbeat steadied. Because the trap door was open now, and beneath it was the fall he'd planned for me. I wasn't going to step into it blind. I didn't confront him the moment I found out. I waited until I could do it without ending up alone in a room where his voice could become the only truth. By Friday, my escape was quietly assembled. A go bag at Lena's place, copies of my documents sealed in an envelope, a new bank account in my name, and backups of every screenshot in 2 separate clouds. I stopped using shared devices. I stopped syncing to the car. I stopped handing him free access to my life. Each step felt like betrayal, until I realized the only thing I was betraying was the version of myself who'd been trained to stay polite. Lena chose the setting for the confrontation, an airy cafe with floor-to-ceiling windows and constant foot traffic. "Sunlight and witnesses," she said. "He can't rewrite you if people can see you." She sat at a table across the room with a laptop open, close enough to help, far enough to look like a stranger. I asked my husband to meet me for lunch. He arrived smiling, confident, dressed like a man with nothing to hide. He leaned in and kissed my cheek. "There's my girl," he said, like I belonged to him. My hands were steady around my coffee. I'd practiced calm like it was a language. "I need to talk," I said. His smile stayed, but his eyes sharpened. "Okay, what's up?" I placed my phone on the table between us, screen down. Not the second phone, just a signal that this conversation was real. "I know about the other phone," I said. A flicker crossed his face, blank then smooth again. "What other phone?" he asked, casual as breathing. "The one you kept under your pillow," I said. "The one with the messages." He let out a small laugh, pitying. "Babe, what are you talking about?" "Denial. Step 1, make me sound dramatic." I slid a printed screenshot across the table. Paper, not pixels. His words stared up at him. "She's right here. That turns me on. His eyes dropped. The color drained from his face. He blinked hard, then looked up with anger disguised as confusion. What is this? You tell me, I said. He pushed the page back like it was contaminated. This is fake. It isn't, I said evenly. I have more. His jaw tightened. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Why were you going through my things? His eyes flashed. That's insane. There it was, step 2. Flip the crime, make the discovery the sin. I found it under your pillow, I said. Warm. He sat back, then smiled slowly like he'd found the angle. So you admit you invaded my privacy? He glanced around the cafe, lowered his voice again. You need help. This isn't normal. Unstable, paranoid, emotional, the labels he'd been practicing. I slid the next page across. Then I'll say she's unstable. No one will believe her. He froze. His mouth opened, then closed. The charm fell away for a second, and in that second I saw him. Cold, calculating, not surprised I knew, only irritated I'd found proof. You've been setting me up, I said softly. His eyes narrowed. You're twisting things. Am I? I slid another page, got it. That's the cushion. His hands curled into fists. Where did you get these? From your phone, I said. From your plan. A pulse jumped in his neck. For a moment, rage threatened to spill over the table. Then he inhaled and changed masks. Okay, he said, voice suddenly gentle. Step 3, pleading. Let's talk about this privately, not here. No, I said. His eyes widened as if the word shocked him. Why are you humiliating me? He whispered. We're married. I stared at him, almost stunned by the selfishness. I'm not humiliating you, I said. Your choices did. He reached for my hand, soft touch, softer voice. Step 4, love bombing. I made a mistake, it meant nothing, I love you, you know me. I pulled my hand away. You called me the situation, I said. You called our savings a cushion, you wrote that you control the story. His face hardened, the sweetness snapped into irritation. Step 5, blame. Maybe if you weren't so distant, he said, if you weren't always in your head. Don't, I cut in, still calm. He leaned back and sighed as if I exhausted him. Look at you, he said. Printed papers, you're acting crazy. The word crazy landed like a slap, not because it hurt, but because it was familiar. It was the exact door he wanted to push me through. I kept my voice level. You consulted a lawyer, I said, 2 weeks ago. His lips parted. He had no line ready for that. He tried one anyway. It was a conversation, advice, you're overreacting. Overreacting. Another shove toward the door. Then his voice dropped, too soft to be kind. Step 6, threat. You need to stop, he murmured. If you take this further, you'll regret it. My stomach went cold. Is that a threat? He smiled without warmth. It's reality, he said. Who do you think people will believe? You with your evidence, or me, the calm husband dealing with a stressed wife? I felt my pulse in my ears, not fear, clarity. He wasn't sorry. He was negotiating control. I'm not alone, I said. His eyes darted, scanning the cafe. I nodded slightly toward Lena. She didn't move. She simply lifted her gaze from her laptop and met his stare. My husband's face tightened. So you've been talking, he said, voice sharp. Yes, I said, and I've been preparing. His posture shifted, the confidence that had carried him in cracked at the edges. He tried again, fast. We can fix this, he said. I'll end it, I'll delete everything, counseling, whatever you want. I listened and grief rose, grief for the marriage I'd believed in, for the man who used to hold my face and promise we were a team. The cafe smelled like coffee and pastry, and I remembered our early dates, how safe his smile once felt. Then my mind replayed the line that turned love into poison, makes her easier to manage. No, I said. The single syllable hit him harder than any screaming would have. What do you mean no? He hissed, rage spilling through. I mean I'm done, I said, voice steady. I'm not staying to shrink so you can manage me. He stared like he didn't recognize me. You're throwing everything away, he said, and now his fear looked real. For what texts? For my life, I said. For my sanity, for the truth. His eyes sharpened again. He reached for the one weapon left, the story. If you leave, he said quietly, I'll tell everyone you had a breakdown. I'll make sure you look unstable. I have your plan in your own words, I interrupted. Try it and I'll show it. He looked around at the windows, the customers, the daylight. He swallowed. Control didn't travel well in public. I stood up slowly. My legs trembled, but my voice didn't. I'm leaving, I said. He grabbed my wrist under the table, fingers digging in. Don't, he whispered, eyes bright with fury and panic. Don't do this. I pried his hand off mine with careful calm. Let go, I said, loud enough that the table beside us turned. He released instantly and plastered on a smile for the room. We're fine, he said too brightly. I looked down at him. No, I said softly for only him. You're fine, I'm free. I walked out into the sunlight, lungs burning like I'd been underwater. Lena rose and fell into step beside me without a word, her presence steady at my shoulder. As we reached my car, my phone buzzed. A text from him, you're making a mistake. Come home and we'll talk. I didn't reply. I started the engine, hands finally shaking now that I was safe to shake. I stared ahead, counting breaths, letting the city blur behind. The fear of losing my marriage was still there, aching and loud. But it was finally smaller than the fear of losing myself. And as I pulled away from the curb, I knew the next part wouldn't be about what he'd done. It would be about what I would do now. The first night I didn't sleep beside him, the silence felt wrong. Not scary, just unfamiliar, like walking into a room you've lived in for years and realizing the furniture has been rearranged. Lena's guest room was small, clean, and smelling faintly of laundry detergent. She handed me a blanket, offered tea, and then gave me space the way only real friends do, close enough to catch you if you fall, far enough to let you stand. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the panic to hit. It came in waves instead of a flood. The urge to go back, the urge to apologize, the urge to pretend this was all a nightmare. My body wanted the old pattern because the old pattern was familiar. Familiar doesn't mean safe. It just means practiced. I checked my phone. He'd sent 6 messages in an hour. Come home. We can fix this. You're embarrassing yourself. Lena is poisoning you against me. If you leave, you'll regret it. I love you. Each one was a different mask, and seeing them lined up like that, rage beside affection, threat beside love, made something inside me go still. He wasn't reaching for me. He was reaching for control. I turned off my notifications and finally cried the way I'd been holding back for days, quiet, shaking sobs that felt like my body emptying out poison. Lena knocked once, barely cracked the door, and whispered, I'm here. That was all. That was enough. The next morning, I became practical in a way grief didn't expect. I met Lena at her kitchen table with a notebook and my laptop like I was preparing for an exam. Maybe I was. The subject was my own life. First, money. We drove to my bank and opened an account in my name only. I moved what I legally could, documented what I couldn't, and asked the banker what steps I needed to freeze or flag suspicious activity. Saying the words out loud, I believe my spouse may be moving funds without my consent, made my hands tremble. But the banker didn't look shocked. She looked experienced. That terrified me and comforted me at the same time. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. Second, the phone plan. I walked into the carrier store and told the representative I wanted my own line. The man behind the counter asked if I had authorization from the primary account holder. My stomach dropped, the invisible threads again. I took a breath and said, I need to protect myself. What are my options? He softened, lowered his voice, and helped me transfer my number onto a new plan with my own payment details. When he handed me the new SIM card, it felt like a small key in my palm. Third, legal boundaries. Lena's cousin knew a family lawyer and got me an appointment within 2 days. I sat in the lawyer's office clutching a folder of printed screenshots, calendar entries, bank withdrawal patterns, and the email confirming his consultation. The lawyer listened without flinching. When I reached the line, "I'll say she's unstable," the lawyer's jaw tightened. "He's already building a narrative," she said. "But you have documentation. That matters." For the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting a ghost. We talked about separation, about protecting assets, about documenting communication. She told me not to block him, just to keep everything in writing and to avoid phone calls unless recorded legally. She told me to assume every word could end up in court. She didn't say it dramatically. She said it like weather. When I left, I sat in my car and stared at my hands on the steering wheel. They looked the same, but they were. They belonged to someone who had stopped pleading for basic respect. Then came the hardest part, telling people. Not the public announcement, the first call. I chose my sister first because she knew my voice better than anyone. She answered with laughter, mid-story about something trivial, and I had to interrupt with a sentence that tasted like metal. "I left him," I said, "and it's bad." The silence on the other end deepened, then filled with her breath. "Where are you?" she asked immediately. "I'm safe," I said. "I'm with Lena." "What happened?" Her voice cracked. I didn't tell her everything at once. I gave her the truth in pieces, like handing someone sharp glass and asking them not to cut themselves. When I mentioned the money and the plan to make me look unstable, she stopped me. "Oh my God," she whispered. He's evil." Hearing someone else say it did something strange. It relieved me and devastated me. Because if he was that, then the man I loved had never truly existed. Or he had existed only when it served him. My mother was harder. She listened, then asked, "Are you sure?" Not because she didn't believe me, but because mothers want to believe their daughters are safe. I told her calmly, "Yes, I'm sure, I have proof." I didn't defend myself. I didn't beg her to choose my side. I stated facts like a woman who trusted her own mind. That was new. When he realized I wasn't coming home, he escalated. He called Lena. She didn't answer. He called my sister. She didn't answer. He sent emails that swung wildly between apology and accusation. I made a new rule for myself. Every message was evidence, not emotion. Still, there were nights I almost broke it. Nights when I remembered the early years, how he used to carry my bags without being asked, how he'd text me, "Made it home." Like he couldn't relax until he knew I was safe. Nights when I missed the version of him that felt real. Grief is sneaky like that. It shows up wearing nostalgia and calls it love. One afternoon, I went back to the house, with my sister and Lena in the car behind me, to get the rest of my things. The lawyer had advised me not to go alone. The advice sounded dramatic until I stood at my own front door and realized my hands were sweating like I didn't belong there anymore. He wasn't home. That was intentional. We'd chosen a time when his schedule showed he'd be at work. I moved quickly, pulling clothes from drawers, collecting documents, taking photos of valuables and serial numbers. My sister checked rooms like she was clearing a building. Lena kept her phone ready. The bedroom was the hardest. Our bed sat exactly as we'd left it, smooth and innocent. The pillow he used was fluffed like nothing had ever been hidden beneath it. For a second, I stood there and felt my knees weaken. That was the danger of familiar spaces. They try to convince you nothing ever happened. I reached under the pillow anyway. Nothing. Of course, he moved it, cleaned it, erased the physical proof. But the digital proof lived elsewhere now, beyond his reach, and that realization steadied me. I packed the last of my things and paused at the doorway. The house was quiet, sunlight falling across the living room rug where we'd once danced barefoot to music while cooking dinner. I let the memory pass through me without grabbing it. It didn't belong to me anymore, not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't safe to live inside. Outside, in the car, Lena handed me my go bag from her trunk like it was ceremonial. I held it on my lap as we drove away, and for the first time I noticed something. My shoulders weren't up around my ears. My jaw wasn't clenched. My body was beginning to believe me. In the weeks that followed, survival became routine. I learned how to exist without checking his mood first. I learned how to cook for one without feeling like I was failing. I learned how to sleep without listening for someone else's breathing as proof I wasn't alone. I also learned something I wish I'd understood earlier. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive like a victory speech. It arrives like an empty room where no one is waiting to accuse you. Sometimes peace looked like signing paperwork. Sometimes it looked like silence in my own car. Sometimes it looked like laughing with Lena at something stupid and realizing I hadn't thought about him for an hour. There was a day, small, almost unremarkable, when I was unpacking boxes in my new apartment. I found the sweater he used to love on me, the one he'd call his favorite. My hands hovered above it, and I felt the old tug: keep it because it meant something, throw it away because it meant too much. I held it up, and instead of seeing him, I saw myself. The woman who wore it when she still believed she could earn love by being easy. The woman who cooked dinner while sick, smiled while terrified, collected proof while grieving. And I realized she wasn't weak. She was transforming. I folded the sweater neatly and placed it in a donation bag. Not as revenge, not as a dramatic statement, as a quiet reclamation. I didn't need his favorite anything anymore. I opened my curtains and let sunlight fill the room. It warmed the floor, the walls, my skin. I stood there breathing, feeling the simplest truth settle into my bones. Betrayal didn't end my story. It clarified it. I didn't just find a phone. I found a map of lies, and I chose not to get lost inside it. I found the place where love should have been, and when it wasn't there, I built something else in its place. Integrity, boundaries, a life that didn't require me to shrink. And if you'd asked me, before all this, what strength looked like, I would have pictured someone fearless. Now I know better. Strength is a woman shaking, nauseous, heartbroken, still choosing herself anyway. Strength is walking out into daylight with your truth in your hands. Strength is turning "I found a second phone" into "I found my power," and never apologizing for the difference.